Hey everybody, Brett from Love Bats and the Belfry back for another video. Everybody, this is Mildred. Mildred, if you could say hi to everybody. I'm losing my voice. She's a little bit like Golden Boy, just a bit shy, but really likes to just hang around. Anyways, this is a kind of a year-end video. I wanted to talk about some of my favorite horror movies, and I'll briefly cover some of the worst horror movies in my opinion in this video, but I did want to do kind of like a year-end list of my favorite horror movies of the year. I'll just start off with getting the worst ones out of the way in my opinion. Night Swim, did not like this movie. This is one of those movies that was kind of unnecessary and also like kind of defeated the purpose of the movie. Like the way it resolves was like, you could have just done that in the beginning, but anyways, it is like kind of a Blumhouse movie, so you kind of expect that out of it. And Night Swim was not scary whatsoever. When I watch horror movies, I'm pretty desensitized to what is considered scary and what's not. Like, it really takes a lot to actually, like, creep me out. I'm kind of the wrong person to ask on that, but I will just say, like, I don't think anyone would be remotely scared by Night Swim whatsoever. There is that one episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark called Tale of the Dead Man's Float. That was like a TV show for kids, and honestly, that episode is probably scarier than this movie Night Swim. Like, it's not good. Don't waste your time with it. Let's move on. The Strangers Chapter 1. There's supposed to be 2 other movies coming out. I can't really see where they're gonna go with this. The optimist in me would say they're gonna try something new with the other 2 movies, but The Strangers Chapter 1 was kind of just a retelling of the original Strangers movie, but just in a more updated setting where it's like, instead of someone's vacation home, which that's not like a dated concept, but it was like at an Airbnb. And of course, kind of like the first Strangers movies, it's like you just made the worst decisions possible. This is one of those movies where I'm just like, the more I thought about it, I'm like, why? Like, no one would be that freaking stupid about everything. Yeah, Strangers Chapter 1 is just, it's bad. I'm glad I did not pay any money to see that, because that would have probably made me angrier. The Deliverance, this was one that came on Netflix. This is one of those movies that was just, it was entertaining, I will say that. A really bad movie, and this is one of those, like, based on a true story type, things, and it just got overly ridiculous to, like, you didn't think it could get more ridiculous and then play it, like, completely straight and not like in a tongue-in-cheek or like self-aware way. Like, it just continued to get more and more ridiculous. Yeah, this is one of those movies. VHS Beyond, I'm not really a fan of this franchise. I think they're like up to 8 movies now with the VHS series. I've seen VHS 1 and 2 like in whole, and I think my wife and I tried watching VHS 85 and like none of it wasn't doing anything for us. And with this new VHS Beyond, which was more about sci-fi plots and such, I think this is a cool thing that is kind of showing off these little like short films that are directed by certain up and coming filmmakers, and even some people who are just looking into getting like directing stuff, who are actors and such. But this didn't do anything for me. I'm like already forgetting a lot of the short. The one concept of like the ones of like the people jumping out of the plane was an interesting concept, like where they were about to jump out of a plane and they saw like a UFO. That is a cool concept, but I didn't think it was executed the best. And I'm just not fond of like, I don't mind found footage, but I don't like found footage that's like cameras like this the whole time. I can't get behind a movie like The First Cloverfield because it's just 90 minutes of just the camera shaking. I would say probably the best one of the whole movie was probably the first short. Yeah, the first segment where it was like the kind of tactical force or whatever that like breaks into this house. That had some cool practical effects and had some cool like action sequences, but yeah, I started checking out by like the second short. I was already starting to get, and this isn't that good. I just didn't enjoy myself watching VHS Beyond. And then the last one, I have to say it, if you enjoyed it, please by all means enjoy it. I say that all the time on this channel, and I've mentioned this in other videos, but Terrifier 3, I can't actually say this was like a badly made movie. It actually is a competent, well-made movie. The practical effects are really good, but just from a personal standpoint, I am now finally made my stance on how I feel about these movies. I'm not a fan. It's just not for me. It's not my cup of tea. It's one thing to have like over-the-top gore and violence in movies, but when it gets like really, really sadistic and it's just like you're watching people get like tortured for 5 minutes before getting killed, and then after they're killed, like the aftermath, like to me, I can watch like extreme horror if it has some substance to it, but to me the Terrifier movies have no substance. It's just all grotesque. It's like there's just nothing to it, and to me Terrifier 3 finally like gave me that opinion on these movies. It's like, they're just not for me. I see the appeal to it because if you're into just practical effects and over the top violence in movies and you want to try to have a good time with it, like, I can see the appeal to it. But to me, it got so like sadistic that I'm just like, I don't want to watch a bunch of people get tortured. And especially the fact that it's like, this movie's supposed to be fun. I just didn't have fun with it. Basically turning into baby food, like with all the gore. It's like by like the second, like third kill, I was just like, I mean, the whole movie is going to be the bedroom scene from Terrifier 2. And that's basically the case with Terrifier 3. Terrifier 2, I didn't like that one either, but at least with the bedroom scene in Terrifier 2, it was kind of like, okay, that was like the really big kill of the movie. And like the rest of them were like, you know, typical slasher kills, which was fine. But yeah, like Terrifier 3, it's like, I mentioned this in my like, you know, ranking Christmas movies. It's like, why does everyone think that going bigger in a sequel means you're going to have a better movie? Maybe they don't have that mindset, but just having the mindset of like, we have to go bigger in the sequel. I don't understand that logic. That's not going to appeal to people about going to see a movie. It's like, you know, when you go to see a movie like Predator, like, why do they think, oh, well, when we make the sequel, we have to do predators, make it plural, and we have to have more than one predator? It's like Predator 2 also like just had one predator. I don't know. I just don't get the logic of making sequel like that. So that was with me with Terrifier 3, and I'm just like, I'm over this. I'm not in line to see the next one. If you want to see it, obviously go enjoy it, but you know, it's just, it doesn't speak to me. So I'm just going to move on from it. All right, so let's get to the best horror of 2024. Oddity. This was one that I covered more in depth on the channel. I really enjoyed Oddity. I love a good, just slow burn, you know, well thought out plot and like good characters. And Oddity definitely delivered that for me. A really good addition to the horror genre. And, you know, it's not doing anything groundbreaking, but I like movies that take their time. And this is one of those movies, and the payoff is worth it. I saw the TV glow in the trans community. This is one that's really speaking to a lot of them, and I'm glad that a movie like this was being made for the trans community, for them to really like connect with something like really deeply. The reason I love this movie is because you don't really have to be in that community to really appreciate a movie like this. To me, I just took away from it being like, if you've ever felt like an outcast and you felt alien and you've never felt like you belonged anywhere or that type of thing, it can really speak to you. And like how find this form of escapism, because like real life just isn't that exciting. You just feel like you don't really have a place in like reality, and like I kind of took that away from it. I feel like this is kind of like the new generation's Donnie Darko, because Donnie Darko really spoke to me, you know, when I was younger, and I still love that movie, and it doesn't really speak to me as much now, but I still have an appreciation for that movie. And I Saw the TV Glow definitely gave me a vibe like that, where I felt like I could really connect to it. And it's almost unfair to just call I Saw the TV Glow a horror movie. There are aspects that are like, that are horrifying in it, and like the end of the movie is something like you feel like you can feel on a very emotional level. To just the end of the movie, like the main character just lets out this primal scream of desperation. I don't know, I really connected with that. And like a lot of people complain that there wasn't really much of a resolution to this movie, but it didn't need it. You didn't really need to know where it went from there. But this is one I only watched once, and I do want to watch it again. But the first watch and thinking about it more and more, I really enjoyed it, and I'm enjoying it more and more when I think about it, so I definitely want to rewatch it. In a Violent Nature, I also covered this one on the channel. If you want to see that in-depth review, check out that review. In a Violent Nature is an example of a slasher movie that I do like, and especially it tried something just slightly different, where we're following killer around basically. I'm sure some people didn't care for how this movie like kind of ended, or like maybe the last like 10-15 minutes, like how it kind of wrapped up. I actually didn't mind it too much. I think it worked for me. Yeah, this is the best way to describe it, is like if A24 made a Friday the 13th movie. And I mean, this is an example of like, you can have a gnarly kill without it being like mind-numbing to watch. And so I thought the kills in a Violent Nature were good. And I mentioned this in my review of it, but I found this movie, despite all the like the gnarly kills and stuff like that, I found this movie very calming to watch. Like I felt this sense of calm just watching the killer just walk through nature basically. To me, that was unique. unique, but this is one of those movies where you know whether you're going to like this movie or not. It's very quick to be like, oh, it's just watching a killer walk around for 90 minutes. It's like, it's more than that, but I can see people just only taking that away from it. I really enjoyed In a Violent Nature. I think it was one of my favorites of the year. The First Omen, this is one that's like shockingly a prequel movie that stands on its own. Like, you don't even have to watch The Omen to really, you know, have that connection. It really is its own movie, and it just happens to be a prequel to The Omen. I would just say the last like scene before like the credits, or maybe it was like mid credits, it just felt like a tacked on thing where it was like, oh, you have to have some sort of connection to the original Omen. You know, without that scene, this movie really is just its own thing, and I really liked it. The girl who played the lead character, she was in the TV show Servant, like, and I liked her in Servant, and she kind of played a fairly close role like in this movie, as well as like she was a nun in the First Omen, but in Servant she kind of was this person who was very close with her religion and such. Awesome imagery. Like, there's one scene in the First Omen, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. It's hard to like get that out of your mind. When you see this, you're just like, oh my god. It's pretty gnarly, but I like that aspect of it, and I'm always amazed by like effects like that or how they shoot stuff like that. So, but yeah, overall really good movie, like almost a character study. Like, there's just some scenes where like the lead actress just really brought it to the table. Prequel to The Omen didn't need to be this good, but it was, so it definitely was one of my favorites of the year. Late Night with the Devil, this was one I think was technically released last year, but with 2024 it like came on Shudder, kind of like a quarter, maybe like March or April in 2024 it came to Shudder, and that's where I saw it. I really enjoyed this movie. It's unfortunate that this movie is forever probably going to be associated with the fact that AI was used in this movie, but like only in one little aspect where it was like a couple photos were made just using AI. And I get people's outrage of it, but it's also like, now looking back in hindsight, it's really not that big of a deal. Granted, they could have just hired someone to do the visual art for like, what is it called, Night Owls, the late night show, and that it was used using AI. Overall, like David Dastmalchian, I don't know, I can't pronounce his last name, David Dastmalchian, I think, but he did an amazing job as the lead and the host of this late night show, Night Owls. This was just a cool concept. Like, it's nothing like groundbreaking whatsoever, but I loved how like the old look of it, like this was during the 70s and, you know, shot like on Halloween. It really worked for me. I just really enjoyed it. This was one of those, like, I could totally watch this again. I think some people might think that this isn't a very rewatchable movie. I think it is, though. Like, just based on the performances, like, it was just really entertaining to watch. It was definitely one of my favorites. Longlegs. In my review of Longlegs on the channel, I said, like, I didn't think it was, like, flat out amazing, but granted, I think this year in horror was pretty good. There were a lot of decent horror movies, or at least solid ones, and for me, Longlegs, this got a lot of hype, but despite the hype, I still came out of this movie really enjoying it. This was a very well-crafted movie. Oz Perkins, I would consider myself an Oz Perkins fan, the director of this movie, and like, I like The Black Coat's Daughter, I really like Gretel and Hansel, and with this movie, he's now going to be a name to look out for because of Longlegs. Longlegs is definitely his most accessible film, with the performance from Nicolas Cage. This was one of those performances, like, despite there's one scene where Nicolas Cage's character in the car, like, you saw Nicolas Cage come out in that scene, but most of the other scenes, you really did see a character. You just didn't see Nicolas Cage being like his crazy self in, you know, a lot of his other movies. I mean, this is coming from a huge Nicolas Cage fan anyways. Yeah, his performance in Longlegs I thought was really good. I mean, you could compare it to Silence of the Lambs, but this was throwback, like, thriller type movie of like having a supernatural element that really worked, and yeah, it didn't go so overboard with it. Like, I thought it was pulled off really, really well, and overall, like, I wouldn't mind watching this again, so I really enjoyed Longlegs, so definitely on my list. Lisa Frankenstein, I loved this movie. I know this is definitely not a movie for everyone, but this is a good example of a movie that it knows the audience it's going for, and it doesn't really try to stray away from that. This is one that's like, if you like spooky, if you like Tim Burton movies, if you're like into goth stuff, if you're into bands like The Cure, Susie and the Banshees, Echo and the Bunnymen, if you're into that stuff, this is a movie for you. And it's like kind of a twisted romance, and it doesn't really stray from that. It's not trying to be something it's not. I don't think it's by far a perfect movie, but this is a movie that is is very casually easy to watch, I would say. I loved it. I love the fact this came out in February of this year, because I was like, normally January, February, like the winter months, there's not a lot of like horror or like at least like spooky type stuff that comes out during that time of year. And if we do get horror movies, it's usually something that's just like not good or just really bad or some sort of Blumhouse film. This movie came out and I was like, this is right up my alley. And yeah, it was. I really enjoyed it. And I've watched it, I mean, casually once, and, you know, maybe watched it again, like actually paying attention to it. I have this on Blu-ray now, so I clearly liked it a good bit. So I couldn't be like, oh, it's not on my best of, because to me, it's like, if I want to rewatch a movie, it's probably going to be on my best of. So Lisa Frankenstein, definitely a good one. And then I wanted to lead off this whole thing with, we'll just say, I did not get around to seeing every horror movie this year. I missed Smile 2. People said that was pretty good. I've missed, yeah, a fair amount of like decent ones like Strange Darling. Yeah, I mean, you can't get to all of them, honestly, but I am really glad I ended up catching this one before the year had finished up, but that is The Substance. This is a movie that had a crazy amount of hype behind it, like I would say way more than Longlegs. And I had a friend who even like texted me, who knows I love horror movies, and he was like, out of the blue, he was just like, holy crap, have you seen The Substance? And I was like, no. And he's like, you absolutely have to watch it. And this is one that I actually believe the hype, and it actually lives up to the hype. This is a movie that really, really good. You could chalk up this entire film to the phrase, the price of beauty, which, you know, I think it's much more than that, but if you had to describe it in a sentence, it would be that. Yeah, Demi Moore, for being her age and just like doing a movie as out there as this, it is awesome. This movie's so unhinged, but in such a good way. Just when you think this movie can't get more insane, it does. This is one of those where at the end of the movie, like the last like 10 minutes of the film, like this movie just keeps upping the ante as it goes on, but like I was fully in it. The only downside I would say to this movie is there's a moment when a character gets kicked and they literally like fly across the room, and I'm like, what is this, The Matrix? I was like, that took me out for a split second, but I was fully into in on this movie the entire rest of the way. The last like 10 minutes, like, I mean, slight spoilers, but it gets pretty dang gory. This is one movie that like, it's already fairly gory and there's a good amount of body horror throughout this film, but the end, it like takes it to a whole new level. And watching it, I couldn't help but just be like, this is so metal. Like Nathan Explosion, like from Metalocalypse, would just be like, holy crap, it's so brutal. Like it in a good way. Like I had such a blast with like the last 10 minutes of this film. You know, this is one of those movies where every once in a while a horror film comes along that just like, it defies people's expectations, and like people actually like leave it going like, holy crap, that was insane. And I kind of had that reaction. I mean, when I first initially finished watching The Substance, I wasn't like, holy crap, that was insane, but I was like, dang, that was a pretty wild movie and that was really good. But then the more I thought about this movie, I'm just like, this movie really was insane. Yeah, I mean, I would say it was the best horror film of the year, number one. I'm sure people will go into this movie. I'm one of those people that when you hype up something, I'm coming out of it being like, it wasn't as good as you were hyping it up to be. But this was one that was like, I 100% like genuinely believe the hype behind it and why people reacted the way they did to The Substance. Really, really well made movie. Yeah, fantastic performances. Like, there's one scene in this movie, like, this is not like an emotional movie, but there's one scene in this movie that like I couldn't help but like my heart broke for Demi Moore's character, and it has to do with like her looking herself in the mirror. And if you've seen it, yeah, you know that's the scene I'm talking about. But I'm so sorry, but yeah, The Substance had a lot of substance to it. All the body horror and the gore, like there was substance to it. That's exactly why I love this movie, and I definitely will want to watch it again. This is one of those, like, I probably will have to buy a physical copy of it, because I usually have a rule with physical copies of stuff. It's like, I'm only buying it if I really liked it. I bought Lisa Frankenstein, so clearly I really liked it, and I'm probably going to buy The Substance because I really loved it. So yeah, best horror film of the year by far to me. I know a lot of people said Strange Darling was definitely up there too. At least for me, The Substance was awesome. So highly recommend The Substance, and I highly recommend all of the ones I consider the best horror of the year on this list. I'm going to wrap it up here. If you enjoyed this review though, definitely give me that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and most mostly a horror guy, but I can be all over the place with this channel, so hopefully you're down for the ride with some of the material I'm doing, and hopefully you enjoy my commentary. Yeah, before the year had fully wrapped up, I at least wanted to get my thoughts out on general, my favorite horror films of the year, so hopefully you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you in a future video. Say bye, Mildred. Bye.